Welcome everyone to the second installment of our webinar series on making adult learning work for the future. My name is Anja Meyerkort and I'm a labor market economist at the OECD's Directorate for Employment, Labor and Social Affairs. In today's webinar, we will discuss how to design adult learning opportunities that are innovative, interesting for learners and relevant to the labor market. I will start the webinar by giving a short presentation of latest OECD research on the topic. And then I will be joined by Melissa Jones from General Assembly and Björn Schulz from Arbeit und Leben Berlin-Brandenburg e.V., who will share their hands-on experience of designing innovative adult learning programs. At the end of this webinar, we will be answering your questions. So please use the question window on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar screen to submit your questions. This webinar is part of a three-part series on making adult learning work for the future. At the OECD, we think that it is an important topic as the need for adult learning is increasing. Mega trends such as technological change, population aging, and deepening globalization are changing the type of jobs that are available and how we do them. This leads to changes in skill demand and supply and increases the need for up and reskilling opportunities. We know from the OECD survey of adult skills that most adults learn to advance their career. More than 50% of adults are taking part in job-related training to do their job better, to improve the possibilities of getting a new job or getting another job in the company that they work in, or to reduce the risk of losing their job. But not all training helps them get there. Data from a different survey, here the European Adult Education Survey, shows us that only 2 in 3 adults think that participation in training helped them achieve positive employment outcomes. With positive employment outcomes, we mean getting a new job or new tasks, a higher salary, being promoted, and performing better in their current job. In other words, 1/3 of adults who participate in training don't think that it helped them to advance their career. And in this graph, you can also see that there's great variation between European member states in this case, which is where this survey has been conducted. This suggests that we must improve adult learning provision and make it more relevant to the labor market. But how can we do this? Firstly, we need information on which skills are needed in the labor market now and in the future. This information should be used to inform what types of adult learning opportunities are offered and also to design incentives for adult learners. Some countries, for example, are offering fully funded training opportunities in in-demand professions only, or more generous education and training leave when training for an occupation that is in demand. Secondly, we should consider involving all stakeholders in the design, delivering, and monitoring of adult learning. This includes the responsible levels of governments, may that be national, at regional or local level, social partners, education providers, and also employers themselves. Information from social partners in particular can really help us design adult learning that meets the needs of employers and the needs of individuals, as conveyed through the trade unions. Finally, to understand the labor market relevance of training, data on outcomes of the training is needed. The majority of countries today don't have comprehensive data on outcomes of adult learning available. Collecting this data and making it available to individuals and employers increases transparency and can help everyone make better choices. It can also support stakeholders in taking corrective action, for example, by limiting or channeling funding to those opportunities that are not delivering the desired results or that are delivering the desired results. While the relevance of training is extremely important, it is equally important to keep in mind how adults learn best when designing adult learning opportunities. In many places, adult learning today still takes place in a classroom setting that mimics the teaching and learning that we all know from school. However, adults have very specific needs when it comes to learning, and they learn best when they drive their own learning process. They also learn best when what they learn is put into context, for example, the workplace environment, when the learning is practical and problem-oriented. I'm now excited to hear more from our guest speakers about how they ensure that adult learning opportunities they offer are attractive to the individual learner and relevant to the labor market. I will now be joined by Melissa Jones, who is the Senior Director for Learning at General Assembly, where she oversees curriculum and instruction for their worldwide network. General Assembly is an education provider and a pioneer in education and career transformation. It specializes in delivering today's most in-demand skills. I'm also being joined by Björn Schulz, who is Head of Department Work and Qualification at the education provider Arbeit und Leben, Berlin-Brandenburg. He shares his experience with the project E-Video Transfer, a basic education program for people who have low skill levels and unemployment. The project is funded by the German Federal Ministry of Education and running since 2012, and takes a very innovative approach to basic skill training for this target group, which I think will be interesting to you. So hello to both of you. I hope you can hear me. Let's wait until they're logged in.
Yeah, we can hear you, Anja.
Great, Björn. I can hear you. Is Melissa there also? Not yet.
Hi there, I'm here. Apologies, I was muted.
Wonderful. This happens in these situations. Great to have you both on. Well, anyway, I thought we can start with Björn, and maybe he can start with telling us a little bit more about e-video transfer. I've already mentioned sort of the basics of what you're doing, but just tell us a little bit about the innovative approach that you've taken to deliver basic skill training.
Yeah, as you said, yeah, thank you, Anja. As you already said and mentioned, it's a software we invented, a web-based training actually for people, for workers with low basic education skills. That means people who especially cannot probably read and write and calculate. And most of them are working, some of them are not working but want to work, for example. And the training is invented for specific sectors like transport or hospitality or cleaning. So that's an important factor, I think. And the most innovative thing about the web-based training, actually, it's a quite normal web-based training, but the innovative thing is that it's story-based. So the exercises the learners have to do are combined or put into a story that is kind of catching and motivating because there is an end. You want to see the end. You want to see the result, the solution of the story, and I think that's the most innovative part. So when I come to the target group, like low-skill workers, it's all about motivation, and we think that a story-based approach is the best motivator in this target group.
Thanks, Björn. That sounds really interesting. And I think a lot of people that have logged onto this webinar will probably be dealing with similar target groups as well and find the information you provide today interesting. Melissa, General Assembly has a very different scope than e-video transfer and also probably a different target group. Can you just give a brief overview of what General Assembly's education offer looks like?
Absolutely. So General Assembly is a worldwide company, and we started out really working primarily with folks who are looking to change careers. So people who were in non-technical careers and wanted to transition to roles as software engineers, user experience designers, data scientists, digital marketers. But increasingly, we're finding an increase in demand, not just for folks who want to start an entirely new career, which we refer to as reskilling. We're also seeing a good amount of demand for folks that want to upskill within their current career path or add certain technical skills to their professional toolkit. So we've developed a large array of educational offerings across our various business units. We do a good amount of instructor-led training, which can take place at one of our campus locations in 16 cities around the globe, or via remote classrooms such as this one online. We also offer instructor-led training at enterprise partner sites, so different company sites around the world. Okay. And then increasingly, we're building more and more self-paced online learning that can be completed on our learning platform called My General Assembly.
Okay. Very interesting. I think that generally assembly puts a lot of emphasis on being really innovative and creating experimental education opportunities. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What makes it innovative and experimental, and how do you approach designing new programs, for example?
Absolutely. I think one of the most unique or interesting things that we do at General Assembly in order to design and build our innovative education is we begin with a user-centered approach, right? So as you were saying, Anya, on the previous slides, how important it is to make the training relevant to users. We start with users when figuring out how to design the learning. So we do a number of different approaches, from convening hiring managers all the way through to bringing together focus groups of recent graduates to learn about, how do we either build a new course from scratch or continue to innovate on the courses that we have in place. And what we hear from users again and again when we bring them together is that the most effective adult learning, the most transformational adult learning is hands-on and immediately applicable to your current career. So we work with the users to identify, what would good hands-on active learning look like within a particular discipline or vertical.
Very interesting. Björn, obviously you have a very particular approach, and that your learning really is very strongly related to the workplace. That's part of what your project is about. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you have ensured that the ED video transfer program is relevant to the labor market?
Yeah. So actually the eVideo web-based training is also actually built from scratch. So we started from a point where we had nothing, and the approaches to, or the web-based trainings are supposed to show the reality, kind of reality of the workplace for those for the target group, and we ourselves, we are an education provider, so we have nothing to do with those kind of workplaces like cleaning and transport. So we have to go there to the companies and watch the workplace first of all. We went there and watched what they are doing, and then we had workshops with like work council members, with the employers, but also with trainers. And with experts from the sectors to make sure which situations at the workplace are important, which situations might be where do the learners or the employees have problems with reading and writing, in which situations. And then we collect all these situations and try to put them in our web-based training. And we also, of course, we also read and analyzed documents like books on vocational training, or like forms the employees use at the workplace and all the stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Did you get any feedback on this? I know that you're sort of at a midpoint at the moment in your project. Did you get any feedback on if employers thought it was actually relevant for their contexts?
Oh yes. So yeah, we received that feedback. So that's clear, and yeah, it is relevant. So the situations we choose, like working with dangerous goods, for example, in a transport in a warehouse, that's of course relevant. That's so there's not a big problem for the employer, and also for the employee it's relevant. So our training is not very company specific. Let me say it like this. It's more general. But nevertheless, the exercises and the situations we choose are relevant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That all sounds very positive, but I know that it can be really difficult to achieve, to trying to make something new and something innovative in adult learning, but also something relevant at the same time. What would you say are maybe the two main challenges that you encountered in setting up this project, and what did you do to solve it?
Yeah, so innovative projects are always a kind of challenge, and the main challenge for our project is that part of the skills, of the media skills of employees who use the e-learning, the web-based training. So as I already mentioned, and you already mentioned, they are low-skilled workers. So they might not have the best media skills like people who are working all the time with a computer. So they don't work with a computer actually in a warehouse, as you can imagine. So that's a point that's a problem. And also the trainers who use our web-based training are not very keen to e-learning, let me say it like this. So maybe that's a specific German problem, but so there is a problem with the media skills, and the solution is, of course, first of all, to make the design, the usability as smart as possible for the learners, but also, of course, train the trainer workshops for the trainers to make them capable to use the e-learning. And another point is that I don't know if it's a specific German problem, but here we have this problem, particularly on the countryside. It's the problem of the technical issues. So it's a web-based training. It's provided through a website, through the internet. So when you go to a place where there is no good internet and no good Wi-Fi or something like that, you have a problem actually. And about that, you can do really nothing. As a service provider, as an education provider, you can do nothing. There are some possibilities like using a desktop instead of a mobile phone or a mobile device like a tablet. But you have to deal with this issue, with these technical issues. But yeah, sometimes there are some trade-offs in that moment.
Thank you. Melissa, do you find yourself in those challenges? I know not everything you deliver is obviously web-based, and some of the challenges that Björn just mentioned are specifically related to the format and the mode of delivery. But I know you're quite diligent in reviewing which of your programs work well and what doesn't work well about them, and then either phasing them out or improving them. Can you mention a couple of learning points from when you reviewed these programs, and is there anything that they have in common, what works well or what a challenge is?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think one best practice that we've adopted when it comes to thinking about our learning programs is to really think about them more as products. We're a tech training company, so we've adopted some of the vocabulary and mindsets of the tech industry. So I actually sit on a product team, and my program managers who manage all of our learning programs, we refer to as product managers. So what they're doing is taking an agile and lean approach to evaluating our learning programs. We're constantly iterating and making changes on the fly. We have data that we collect from our students and our instructors every day as they're learning in instructor-led learning or in self-paced learning, and then also at mid-course and end of course. We use that feedback coupled with industry research in terms of trends about what skills are changing and evolving in industry over time. So, for some of our courses, such as our visual design course, it used to focus on teaching folks how to use Photoshop for wireframing and planning out the user interfaces for websites. But given shifts in industry, we've since changed, and demand from students also, we've since changed to using Sketch and InVision, which is just a different software tool. We're still teaching the same skill, wireframing and website design, but we're using a different software tool because that's what's in demand for industry, and that's what's going to get our folks jobs. I would say that looking across all of our portfolio, one of the big insights we had recently through looking at all of our survey and evaluation data was that my team, the product team, was spending a lot of time building out presentation slides, lesson plans, facilitator guides for our various courses that quickly got out of date because the pace of the technology industry is just so fast. And so each of our instructors, we have about 700 or 800 instructors at any given time across the globe. Each of our instructors was taking those course materials, those lesson plans and presentations, and editing them themselves to keep them up to date. And we realized through our evaluation that having 700 people make the same change or the same edit to a lesson plan was just really inefficient, and not a good use of folks' time, and not creating a great experience for our new instructors who maybe didn't know things were out of date and hadn't anticipated it. So one recent innovation that we've made is we have open sourced, I'm making quotation marks with my hands here because it's not truly open source, but we've essentially moved to a community managed and maintained set of course materials. So all of our content for our courses, our presentations and lesson plans are now stored on either Google Drive or GitHub, which are collaborative tools for large groups of people working together on content. So now instead of my team creating a set of materials that get out of date within a few days, any instructor who has access to those materials can go in and make changes and edits to them on the fly. This is reducing the overhead and the amount of work that each person needs to do. So for us, it's a little bit less about, innovative approaches to learning and sort of like an innovative approach to content management at scale and community contributions towards keeping that learning really relevant and bleeding edge.
Absolutely. It sounds like you have the monitoring and evaluation down at General Assembly, and you're making changes based on that. Is there anything else that you want to highlight that you think works really well and that is one of the key success factors for how General Assembly is operating?
Well, I think it's that user-centered approach, right? And the evaluation and the data and the monitoring is part of that. We have the mindset that when you're creating a new course, you bring users in to help you decide what to cover and how to teach it. And then you hire actual practitioners to deliver the content so they have some credibility with the learners. And then you continually listen to and talk to the users throughout the life cycle of the product so that you can make changes. I would say I mentioned that we take an agile and lean approach to our program development. And by that, I mean, we generally don't refresh an entire course or an entire program at once. Instead, we'll work on different lessons, different activities, different components every day. So we're releasing every 2 weeks updates and changes to our products. Otherwise, our cycle for development would be too long to keep up with the pace of the industries that we are trying to target with our classes.
Well, that's very impressive. Turning to Björn, I wanted to ask you as well the same question. You've talked about the challenges a little bit, mainly technical, but what do you think has worked well for your project, specifically when you think about relevance and innovation of the provision?
First of all, the story-based approach worked really well when it comes to motivation, like to get involved in the e-learning for the learner. So that's the thing that worked very well. We invested much time for the creation of the dialogues, of the story around the exercises. You have to imagine that the learner is talking to a virtual colleague in the story. So that's something that worked very well. It took a long time to create these stories. It's like in computer games, like such an adventure game. So, but that worked very well. And also the way we create the exercises, as I described before. So it's not only that we have workshops and the feedback in the workshops, but we had also feedback in the process of creating the content, the exercises, and the story. So we always during the process, we always interview experts from the sectors, also trainers who work with the target group. So they give us the feedback which might work well, or which is not a good idea, for example, when it comes to science or colors, but also to content itself. So there is a constant review in the process of creating the content, and that, on the other hand, that means creating a web-based training like eVideo took a lot of time. So we have around 9 to 12 months till web-based training is created, actually. So, but in the time, it's during that time, it's always tested and reviewed, and that's a very good thing, because I think that means in the end that as I said before, the employers and also the employees, the learners, are thinking that the content is relevant, and yeah, so.
Mm-hmm. So both really big focus on the reviewing process, although projects or companies of very different scales that are working on the provision of adult learning. Before I want to open the questions to the audience, I just wanted both of you to give your top 3 tips you would give someone who is trying to set up a similar project elsewhere. Maybe we start with Björn, because maybe his project is more achievable for many listening, and then we can go to Melissa and sort of talk about, if someone else wants to build a global education company, what should they do? So Björn, you start.
Yeah, I have thank you. I have 3 tips, and one of them, the first is, you remember the famous quote of Bill Clinton in the 90s when he said, "It's the economy, stupid." And my tip is, it's the story, stupid. So you have to create a good story for this specific target group you're talking about in my project. You have to create a story where you put in the exercises and the content you want them to learn. So that's the main point. And when you create content, the lesser is more. So don't create too much content. Don't put the screen full of content. Less content is better than more content. But in that respect, don't reduce the basic things. So all the workplace things have to be there, because the learners have to make a connection between the content on the screen actually and the workplace, their workplace. And the third tip is think on the media skills. So you have a target group who are low skill workers, so they might have low media skills. That means you have to think during the creation process of the e-learning about the skills of the media skills of the target group, where you put buttons, icons, and all the stuff. So that's a very important thing.
Thank you. Melissa, now over to you. I mean, maybe 3 learning points, 3 top tips for education providers of any size that they could learn from what you do at General Assembly.
Absolutely. I think it's hard to think if you want to start a global education company, where would you start? But I would agree with you, and I think that the story is very, very important. And then keeping it simple was definitely one of the things that I was going to say. But I would say my 3 tips, regardless of the size of your organization, the number one thing that you can do to be successful with any learning program that you're trying to launch is to really understand the who you're trying to reach, and really dive deep and build out some personas and some understanding of who those people are. You can only learn that by talking to those folks, better yet, bringing them in and having them help you develop the actual design of the program. And then my second tip would be to really understand the what. What are the outcomes? What are you trying to help those people achieve? Because that way you can backwards plan and figure out what all of the different components of your learning program need to be to get there. I think that for that what, you really need to talk to hiring managers and to folks in industry who will actually be placing the people that are going through your learning. And then the final tip would be to just really think about the why, and that's where the story comes in, right? Why should those folks who are you're targeting care about the what? And how do they connect the dots? It's your job to tell that story. And bonus points if you can get the folks who are actually going to be teaching or delivering the learning to be practitioners themselves and to be part of your target audience. So it makes it so much easier for that story to be credible and internalized by your learners.
All very good points, and I think very applicable to really everyone who works in the sector and trying to design opportunities for adult learners. I want to switch to the audience questions, and I think we're going to start with Melissa. And I know you've said that you're more concerned sort of about innovation in designing of the system of designing adult learning opportunities. But I guess the question comes from the point that General Assembly is using different modes and different ways of teaching and learning. And the question is, if you have any view on which mode works best. I mean, there's a lot of talk about online opportunities. You said you're doing online and classroom. Have you learned anything in the time at General Assembly of what's the best way to teach people?
Absolutely. I've worked in the adult learning space for many, many, many years, and this is a big debate, right? I think, unfortunately, the answer is there is no one mode of learning that works best for every person. And so what I find is the most successful programs are the ones that offer several different modalities and allow learners to choose. My ideal adult learning program is one that has some self-paced online, some synchronous group time with an expert in the room, and some small group learning. Some blended component like that I think is ideal, but that's not going to work for everyone and everyone's schedule. So what we try to do is make each component, each part of our blended modality stand alone and be good enough. So if you just are going to do the online self-paced learning, you get enough out of that you learn something. If you're just going to join the group go-to meeting or Zoom like this, you get enough out of that. But you get the best experience if you do the full blended model. That's what we try to go for. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there's a silver bullet or one answer for every learner.
I was kind of hoping for the silver bullet, but I did expect this answer, to be fair. But it's very good advice about blending the different modes of learning and making them stand alone as well, so people can pick what works best for them. The next question would go to Björn, and you previously said that it takes a long time to develop a e-video learning program. How many people are involved, and who is involved to make this work?
So yeah, I already said it's around 9 to 12 months. So and in our case, there are several companies involved, several stakeholders. So we here at Arbeit und Leben are in this project are only three people actually. But there's also a screenplay writer, for example. It's 1 or 2 persons, and the company that's programming the web-based training. These are quite more people. It's around 10 all in all, because they have their different departments there, with graphic design and other programming. And then that's very much also many people is the part of the creating of the videos, the video company actually. So you have to think about the actors, for example, and the producer, camera, and all this stuff. So that's also again around 15 people, 15 to 20 people. So all in all, are 40 people involved in creating an e-video.
Wow. Okay. So something to consider for other people who are thinking about testing similar approaches themselves. I have a question myself for you. I know that you're starting a new phase in the project, and I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit of what you are planning to do differently. I mean, you've talked about the learning, but what are you going to do differently or expand on moving forward in your next phase of the project?
So one main thing we will change is in the next phase that we have that we create the content ourselves. So that's maybe connected to the thing as said before, because we do many of the producing of we do with external companies. So we think it would be a better approach to create more contents here at Arbeit und Leben with software like I don't know if you heard of that, like Articulate. And so we think that's also a good solution, because we have the content like the videos and the photos and all this. So we have so much media now on our hard drives, so we can do a lot of things with them here at Arbeit und Leben. So, and the other thing is, when we implement our products in companies, we would go another way. Now it's more like it's delivered through a website, so everyone can use it. You can go on the website and use it, and that's okay because it's governmental funded, and it's a good way to bring it to the people, to the learners. But to bring it more in companies, we want to go through the HR departments, if they have some, or the HR people there in smaller companies, and to put it directly where it's useful, and that in the company.
Mm-hmm. So connecting more with sort of one end user group of your product, which are the
right.
HR managers as well. Okay. Another question for you, which is about user involvement, because I think you mentioned that you engage with people who work with the target group. Do you have any people from the target group who are directly involved in the design?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and my answer is simply no. I want to explain that because sometimes some other companies or education providers who work with the target group, low skills workers and people with basic education needs, really work with the target group. I think it's for that we want to create here a web-based training. That's not a good way and not a good approach, because the target group is very so very different. So very different people with different backgrounds. So we would have many individuals and many individual positions and backgrounds. So that doesn't make any sense for creating a generally usable e-learning. So that's why we work with people like the trainers, who can kind of filter all the individual backgrounds of their target group. So they, because when we would work with we tried to work with the target group actually also in the creating process, but then we have the problem with, I cannot, like quotes, I cannot use it, I don't know how to use the smartphone, I don't know how to use the computer. So we have a problem before coming to the content. We would have a problem with some other problems of the low skills. So.
Anya, can I chime in? We've definitely had those issues as well. I think that whenever you want to bring the target learner, their target audience into your content development process, there's a lot of work that needs to go up front in terms of thinking about how to facilitate that. And making sure that the folks that you're bringing into the process are set up for success. So to your point, Bjorn, like if you have folks who are low skilled with computers and then you say, open up this Google Doc and add a comment with, they're not going to be able to do that, right? So maybe with that particular user group, you would want to host a luncheon, right? And interview them, or a phone call or text. You want to meet people where they are. And what we do with our content creation is we have our product managers who are thinking about the overall design of the program. Then we have our instructional designers who are making sure it's actually good content. And then we work with subject matter experts and users to inform that content, but we always have a designer that's looking across it to make sure that the output's good. I would never ever just say to a target user, write this lesson plan for me and expect it to be any good. You have to have that expertise of the instructional designer and script writer and video producer. All those talented folks have to be involved.
Okay. Yeah. I like that you were chipping in there. So I'm not to put you on the spot, but is there anything that you would like to ask each other? Anything that came from this conversation that you want to know a bit more about? Maybe starting with Björn. I don't know if you have any specific questions that you would like to know more of from Melissa's experience. I am putting you on the spot now.
Maybe Melissa can start.
Well, I do actually have a question. I know from my past life that there is a lot of government and regulatory considerations in Germany, right, when you're spinning up new programs, and that's something that we encounter here in the United States in different ways, and I wonder if folks on the webinar do as well. When you want to spin up a new program for adult learners or work on addressing a real issue facing the economy of a country, and then you've got regulatory hurdles in the way. How do you all make that work for you? How do you address that?
What do you mean by regulatory challenges?
I mean, such as like, okay, we want to have this program and we want to invite these
Uh-huh.
people, but it has to be approved by these bodies by, in the US, it would be like state governments or
Okay.
provincial governments need to look at the curriculum, need to approve the syllabus, the cost, blah, blah, blah.
Okay. No, yeah, for eVideo, we don't have this challenge actually. So because it's not certified or something like that by governmental bodies. So if you want that, you have to talk with them and you have to apply for a certification. But I think that's not a big issue here in Germany. So
Gotcha.
and because it's no, that's I cannot say that's a big issue. So it's a issue of time, but not of content or something like that. As long as you are not in specific fields like I don't know, like air travel, so where it's a little bit different, but. We don't have this issue with the certification or regulation process. And the other thing is that we maybe talking about funding. I don't know how it is in other countries. I think in European countries it's quite the same, or you can get funding from the European Commission sometimes. But in Germany, it's so that the government identifies some fields where they want to put money in. For example, for our target group, we know in Germany that there's not qualification and training for them provided by the companies. So they're not in focus of training that's that's paid by the companies. So the government decided to put money in there to get them to get a training for them or to get tools which are used for training for those target groups. So that's the way how it works here, kind of. I think that's in some European countries it might be the same because of the funding by the European Commission, at least. So, but there are no real regulatory issues. Yeah.
Mhm. It's
And
quite interesting.
yep,
Sorry,
sorry.
go continue, Björn.
No, that's maybe another interesting question from Melissa. So you are completely privately funded, so it's
Correct.
paid on the market from the market, yeah? Or,
Yes, that's right. And
provided.
so that I think some of the regulatory and certification challenges that we face come from the fact that,
Okay.
we started out as a consumer company. So
Hmm.
learners who come to us actually pay out of pocket, or
Hmm.
some of our learners receive what we call here in the US financial aid, scholarships, grants, and
Hmm.
things like that to pay for our courses. So that triggers a bunch of oversight from the government, which is good and is meant to protect consumers.
Okay. Yes.
And I know that in the EU and in different parts of the world there are different regulations. So, if you're trying to start a new learning initiative where you're either going to get public funding or be charging your learners a
Yeah.
fee, it's something to keep in mind that you will have to understand the regulatory rules in the place where you want to do business. And it's
Hmm.
interesting that you chose e-learning because partially it's not something that you had to go through a bunch of certification in order to do. So your modality choice may be influenced also by some of those constraints of how hard it
Hmm.
is to get something approved or how expensive it is to get something certified.